Welcome to Read the Factory Manual. This is going to be an instructable on how to create a windshield for a Matchbox Jeep. The old Matchbox Jeeps, the windshields break off, and it's very difficult to find a Matchbox Jeep with the windshield in place. So I'm going to show you how to draw this windshield inside of Thinkercad. And then we're going to take it and print it out on a printer, on a 3D printer. So we're going to take you through the entire process from beginning to end. So Thinkercad, if you don't have a Thinkercad account, you can hit the join now and sign up or sign in to the Thinkercad. You can also sign in with your Autodesk account, your Google account, or your Apple account. I'm going to sign in with my Gmail account. So my Read the Factory Manual Gmail account, and you'll see I've created a couple different items here. I have created a pipe for the Matchbox pipe truck, and I've created a blade for the class combine. I've created that as well, and I have 2 videos on how I did those too. So if you're interested, head over to my YouTube channel, Read the Factory Manual, and you can see how I made those as well. So here's a drawing of what we're going to be drawing. Here's what it looks like on the Jeep as well, so you can get a good idea of what it is we are drawing. What I had to do first is I needed to prep the Jeep model to make this work. So I did a bunch of filing, as you can see here, and then after filing it down and sanding and getting the body prepped, I wanted it to come down a little bit. See that little gap there in the drawing? That allows me to get a little bit more area to glue on so that hopefully this will stay on for a lot longer. After I did that, I measured it. All of these measurements are in metric because when you print, the printers like to print in metric, and that's their default settings. I've been printing now for a few years, and now I've gotten used to metric, and so that's what I use. So let's get started. Let's create a new design. And first thing we're going to do is change this fantastic name up here to a name that makes sense for this thing. So it's a 72B Jeep windshield. Great. The next thing I want to do is switch this to flat view or orthographic mode. That's going to turn off the perspective portion. And this type of model, I don't want it to be perspective, if you will. It doesn't really change the model per se of what you're drawing. It changes the way you look at it in the modeling software or inside of Thinkercad. Finally, what I'm going to do for setup is I'm going to change my grid or my snap to grid to 0.25 millimeters. So every time I move something, it'll be 0.25 millimeters. I'm going to go ahead and draw in a box first. So I'll pick the box. I want to change the height of my box to 1.75 because that's how thick it is. And then this is called the view cube up here. This changes the way I view my screen. So as I click and hold my mouse button down and move my mouse around, or what is called dragging the mouse, it changes the way the view looks. If I click on the word top, it'll take me right to the top view. So I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to click on one of these grips. You're changing this dimension on this grip right here. That's why the dimension pops up right here. See, I can drag this grip to make it smaller. So I can move it to 8 millimeters if I want to. I can grab the other grip to move it, or I can just simply type in how far I want it to go. In this case, 28.5. I'm going to change this from a solid to a hole. And by doing that, it allows me to see through it. And then I will get this thing centered on the grid. If I can do it. I'll use the arrow keys. The arrow keys are for nudging the model, so up and down, left and right. So the arrow keys help out quite a bit as well. So now what I want to do is I want to create another box inside of here, and that is going to become a hole, and that's going to subtract out this part of the windshield. So I'll draw another box. And And you saw before how I changed it to a hole. You don't have to start with a hole. You can start with a box if you want. Alright, so I want this to be 6 millimeters tall. Well, that's a little too short. Let's make it 6.75 millimeters. And right now it's 14.5. Well, I want 1.5 millimeters there. So what I'm going to do is shorten my box up a little bit. So what I'm doing is I'm getting the math easier for me to do in my head. So that would be 12.5. There. Is that right? 1.5? 12.5? That doesn't seem right to me. Is this not the right size? Let's see. That's 8. That is 8. 1.5. That is correct. It is rather thick. So let's make this a little bit thicker. There we go. And then the width of this thing is going to be 12.75. Now what I want to do is copy this thing. So I'll hit the copy button that's right up here in the upper left. So I'll hit copy, and then I'll paste, and it makes another copy for me. And then I'll just move it over here. And I want to just get it so that it looks good. Let's see. Are we centered here? Yes, we are. That is good. That is good. So that should really be right there. And this one should be about like that. Look at that. That looks good to me. No, it does not look good to me. There. Now I've got it in line with these, because see, this distance here on the grids are the same. So I got it in line with that grid. I've got this in line with that because I want that center to be a little bit thinner. Yeah, that looks great. So now these things are going to become a hole. So this is a hole, and this is a hole. You can see my shape thing got smaller because I hit this arrow right here. That allows you to change its size. Or change the size. I'll click on this guy and then turn on the make it a shape again. Or I'm sorry, I will make it a solid again. And now what I'm going to do is highlight it all. So I'm going to click and hold my mouse here, hold the mouse button down, and then drag the mouse up to here, and that'll select everything. And then what I want to do now is group it, which is right here. So I'll pick group. And what that will do is subtract the holes from the solid. So let's take a look at it now in 3D. There it is in all of its glory. Look at that. So that's the easy windshield. And you could certainly print this out and it would do just fine. But the real windshield has rounded corners right here. So we're going to make rounded corners, and that's the advanced part of this. If you don't want to do the advanced part and you just want to go straight to printing, that's fine too. You can print it out and then file these or sand these round if you wanted to do that once it's printed. But I'm going to show you how to make a rounded corner. So we'll go back to the top. Alright, so we're going to bring in a cylinder. It's a pretty big cylinder, isn't it? You see how the cylinder is like filling up the whole thing? I can't see what's going on. Well, we'll do that hole trick. We'll make that cylinder into a hole. And I'm going to hold the shift key down while I drag my mouse. And what that's going to do is keep it proportional. So that looks about right to me. We're going to use that. So to make this work this is the part here I want to subtract. We'll zoom in so you can see what's going on. This is the part here I want to subtract. I want to remove that. So in order to do that, I need to draw in a box, subtract this from it. So I'm going to draw in another box. This will make much more sense here in a second. So I'm going to draw in another box. And we'll move that here into place. We'll make it a hole as well so I can see what's going on. So I want this box to be like this. And now I'm going to make this box a solid. I'm going to select them all, group it. Huh, why didn't it work? Let's see. Let's look at it in 3D. Oh, that's why it didn't work. It did work. It just subtracted from this bottom part. Here, let me show you what happened. I'll go ahead and group it. See, it only subtracted from the bottom, so that's not going to work. I need to make this thing up high like that. And then I'll group it. Look at that. I'll go to the top. See now, that piece is like that. I want to grab this, and I want to create a mirror of it. I'll mirror it this way. Oh, I need to make a copy of it first, don't I? That's all right. I can make a copy of it now. And then I'll paste it into place. So now I have another copy of that thing. Control Z is undo. I'll move it there. I'll mirror that one this way. Okay. So now that needs to be a hole. And this one needs to be a hole. And I'm going to take this hole and move it right there like that. And then I'll take this hole. Oops, Control Z. I'll take this hole. I'll zoom in some so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. And I'll move it in like that. And you see I'm just moving it in place because I changed my snap grid down here to 0.25. So now I'll select everything. You remember how to do that. Click and drag. And then group. And look at that. I made filleted corners. Let's take a look at this thing now in 3D in all of its glory. So there it is. I can turn on perspective mode if I want. You can see how that changes the way it looks. It's just changing how you look at it on the screen. This is why I like to draw in orthogonal view, because this distance is the same as that one. So that's it. That is my Jeep windshield. Now we're ready to get it saved out to an STL file, and then we can print that. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to export up here, and I'm going to export everything. If you had one thing selected, this would become the option, and you'd want to click on everything. I want to export an STL file, and now it's going to download my windshield. So here is my windshield in the Windows 3D viewer. Look at that. Looks just like a windshield, doesn't it? And we'll close that, and now we'll get ready to print. So I use a program called Cura to print. So let's load up Cura. And Cura is a free program as well. Same with Thinkercad. It's free. And Cura is made by the Ultimaker company. Ultimaker also makes 3D printers. I don't have an Ultimaker printer. I have a Creality Ender 3 Pro. But the Ultimaker program works just fine with that printer as well. So here's Cura. And now I want to find my windshield. So I will open. So I'll go to my downloads. There's my Jeep windshield. There it is. On printers, this Creality printer, there are 4 spots in the corners where the leveling screws are. I like to print over top of those leveling screws. So I'm going to move my thing there, especially if it's a very, very small item. To get this thing to move around, you hold the right button on the mouse, the other button, and then it will orbit. The scroll wheel will zoom in and out, just like in Thinkercad. And holding the scroll wheel down or clicking on the scroll wheel and moving it around, that will pan. So there's my windshield. I am printing in PLA. It's a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. And we'll take a look at the settings. I'm using the default settings that come with the printer right now. and I've turned on a few things. If all your settings here are different than mine, you can go over top of like speed, for example, click on the gear, and then you can turn on the different speed settings. So if you find a setting not showing up in your Cura, go hover over the top of like shell, for example, click on the gear, find the setting you want, hit the check mark, it'll appear. I'm going to print this in low quality. Well, no, I'm not. I'm going to print this in dynamic quality, 0.16, because I want it to be a little bit stronger. I found that if I print this in low quality, even though it's low quality would probably be fine for this, but low quality, it blobs more because the layers are thicker. So 0.16 is fine. The wall thickness of 3 is fine on this. It doesn't really matter. The top layer 6 is fine because it's going to be a solid thing. So the top layers are how many layers on the top of the object. So if this object was real tall, this would be how many solid layers there are, because Cura automatically makes things hollow and fills them in with some sort of infill. So the top and bottom layers are the parts that are solid. And I usually like to make those the same, like 3 and 3, and that makes a pretty good object. Infill density 20% is fine, but again, on this thing is so small it doesn't really matter. The printing temperature, 200 degrees centigrade is not hot enough. I like to be 205. That seems to be my lucky temperature. Same with the build plate. I like it to go up to 60. And I think the reason is because I have a metal build plate on top, a magnetic metal build plate on top of my printer. I think that's causing some insulation issues and the heat isn't transferring well. So that's why I have to be a little bit hotter. The print speed, 50 millimeters a second is usually fine. I'm going to drop this down to 40 because it is a small piece. And I want the wall speed to be 40 as well. And the bottom, I've had very good luck with 35. So I'll change those to that. Enable retraction. What that does is when it gets done printing one area and then has to travel to another area, that's why it's in travel, it sucks the filament back into the nozzle 5 millimeters. On a regular printer, the regular Creality, 5 millimeters is fine. I have modified mine to be a direct drive, so my retraction distance 2 seems to work very well for me. Z-hop when retracted. What that will do is it will actually lift the print head up a little bit. I don't need to do that on this one. The print cooling, that'll turn on the cooling fan. I'm not doing anything what is called bridging, where it prints in space. So I really don't need that turned on, but it doesn't hurt to have it on. So what the heck did we change? I changed the thickness of the walls to be 3, the bottom and the top to be 3. I changed the temperature to be 205 and the build plate to be 60, and I changed the speed to 40 and 35. That's all I changed. And these are the settings that usually work well for any kind of print that I do. So these are good settings to use. So once you have those settings done, you have to do what is called slice. And what slice does is it slices your model into parts. And if we click on preview, you'll see what I'm talking about. So this is the preview, and it's 8 layers high. So as I move down, let's change the angle here for effect. And we can see all of the different layers that it's going to print. I can close my print settings to get that out of the way. And I can go through and look at all the different layers that it's printing. So we can see it starts printing there. It's going to print the skirt, and then it's going to print the part, and then it'll move to the second layer, and so on and so forth. So to get this to the printer, you take the SD card out of your printer, pick Save to a File, and then save that off to your SD card with whatever name you want to give it. Usually I make my names a little bit smaller because the printer display doesn't isn't very wide. It doesn't have very many characters, so I'll go ahead and shrink that down. And then I'll hit save. And now I take the card out of my computer, put it in the printer, and print out the part. After the printer gets warmed up, then it starts to do what is called its homing procedure, where it finds 00 on the printer. And that's what it's doing now. It's moving the y-axis to find 0. And there it found it. And now it's going to move the z-axis down to find 0. And now it's going to print out its first line. And it's normal for it to start halfway or even on the backstroke for that line to come out. And then it'll move over here and start printing the skirt. We saw the skirt there in the preview. I'll go ahead and speed it up, and you can see now it's printing out the part. It'll do a Z, it'll lift the Z up however high we told it to move up. So in our case 0.16 millimeters. And then it'll print the next layer out. And it will repeat that process until it is done printing. So there we go. That's the finished part. So here's the finished windshield, and here's the finished Jeep. So you can see this Jeep looks pretty good now. The windshield looks great, and I think the Jeep looks a lot better with a windshield, don't you? So thank you for watching this special edition of Read the Factory Manual. In this edition, we showed you how to use Thinkercad to design a new windshield for your Jeep. And then we showed you how to print it out. I hope you found this Instructable fun and enlightening. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments.